Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrests of her command chair, the ship's engines humming through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The bridge of the UNS Vanguard wrapped around her in sleek metal and glowing consoles, all bathed in the soft blue glow of holographic displays. Beyond the viewport, the Galactic Concordance's orbital station loomed, a glittering behemoth of alien spires twisting like frozen flames against the starfield. Ilara's hand-picked crew, a tight-knit trio from Earth's remnants, moved with practiced efficiency at their stations. "Status report," she said, voice steady despite her whitening knuckles. Lieutenant Kai Ren, the wiry engineer with his perpetual smirk, glanced up from his console. "Shields at full, ma'am. Engines primed for slipspace jump. But the Concordance is hailing us again, insistent as usual." His fingers danced over the controls, pulling up the transmission. Kai's humor was his armor. Even as humanity's Exodus fleet prepared to cut ties with the galaxy's self-proclaimed arbiters, he grinned. "They sound desperate. Like kids who just realized the game's over." Ilara nodded, her dark eyes locked on the viewport. At 38, she was the oldest among them, her face lined from years captaining freighters through asteroid fields and diplomatic minefields. Brave to a fault, she'd volunteered when the United Nations voted to pull out, humanity's quiet verdict on centuries of unequal alliances. No grand speeches, just a collective decision. "We walk." "Put it through," she replied. The main holoscreen flickered to life, revealing Ambassador Lyric, a towering Solari with iridescent scales and eyes like polished obsidian. His species had brokered the Concordance's peace for eons, but today his mandibles clicked with unease. "Captain Voss, this is folly. Humanity cannot depart without consensus. Your worlds are integrated, your economy, your defenses reliant on our networks." Ilara leaned forward, posture unyielding. "Integrated, yes. Reliant? That's the verdict, Ambassador. We've given more than we've taken. Tech, labor, lives in your wars. Now we choose self-reliance." Her words hung simple and final. Behind her, the crew exchanged glances. They knew the stakes. Leaving meant severing trade routes, facing isolation in uncharted space. But staying meant more concessions, more humanity bent to alien whims. Lyric's scales rippled in agitation. "You risk everything. The void beyond our borders is unforgiving. Anomalies, raiders, the unknown. Reconsider for your people's sake." Before Ilara could respond, a soft chime cut in from Kai's console. "Incoming anomaly alert," he said, smirk fading. "Something spiking on sensors, right in our departure vector." Ensign Mira Solis, the young navigator with her cautious streak and habit of double-checking every calculation, spun in her seat. Her hands flew across her panel, brown curls falling over her focused brow. "It's a gravitic distortion, Captain. Not natural. Looks like a blockade?" "No, wait, it's expanding." Ilara's jaw tightened. The Concordance wouldn't dare. But as the viewport filled with swirling energy and a massive shadow emerged from the distortion, she realized they just might. The alien vessel was a behemoth, its hull a lattice of crystalline spines catching starlight like shattered ice. A Solari Enforcer class built to intimidate. "They're deploying drones," Mira said, voice pitching higher. Caution warred with urgency in her tone. She hated surprises, and this was a galaxy-sized one. Kai cursed under his breath, rerouting power. "Shields holding, but if they lock weapons." Ilara stood, decision crystallizing. "Evasive maneuvers, Mira." Kai, prep countermeasures. "Ambassador, your piece just turned into a wall. Transmit our logs, let the fleet know we're not going down without a fight." Lyric's image wavered, his expression a mask of calculated surprise. "This is not our doing, Captain. But if you proceed." The transmission cut as the first drone salvo lit the void, streaking toward the Vanguard like angry hornets. Ilara braced against the sudden lurch, the ship twisting under Myra's deft piloting. The adventure they'd signed up for, humanity's bold step into independence, had just collided with the galaxy's verdict on their departure. And it wasn't gentle. The dim hum of the conference chamber's recyclers filled the air, a constant reminder that even the Galactic Concorde's vaunted stations ran on borrowed time. Ambassador Lee adjusted his collar, the stiff fabric chafing as he watched the holographic display flicker. The representatives from the Vexery Collective and the Krell Dominion were already seated, their elongated forms shifting restlessly in the anti-grav chairs. Lee's human companions, Captain Elena Vasquez with her squared shoulders and unyielding gaze, and Dr. Raj Patel fiddling with a data slate under the table, flanked him like silent sentinels. The Vexery envoy, a cluster of bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with irritation, spoke first through the translator. Your species' request for expedited withdrawal is unprecedented. The Concord has invested cycles in integrating humanity. This verdict, as you call it, insults our collective harmony. Lee leaned forward, voice steady despite the knot in his gut. He'd prepared for this, rehearsed the words until they felt like lead weights on his tongue. It's not an insult, Envoy Thal 9. It's a conclusion drawn from evidence. Decades of unequal trade, ignored distress calls during the Orion skirmishes, and now this blockade on our colony shipments. Humanity isn't leaving in protest, we're leaving because the Concord has failed its own charter. A murmur rippled through the chamber, the Krell's chitinous claws clicking against the armrests. Elena's hand tightened on her knee beside him. He could feel her readiness, the coiled energy of someone who'd stared down pirate swarms and lived. Raj, ever the contrarian, shot Lee a sidelong glance, his dark eyes twinkling with that mix of sarcasm and strategy. Tell me again why we're dignifying this with words, Raj muttered, just loud enough for Lee to hear. A well-placed EMP would say it faster. Diplomacy first, Lee whispered back, though his pulse quickened at the thought. The chamber's air grew thicker, laced with the faint ozone tang of alien pheromones, tension manifesting in ways humans could only guess at. The Krell ambassador rose, its multifaceted eyes gleaming under the overhead lights. You presume much, primates. Our fleets could interdict your exodus. The resources you've siphoned, fusion cores, xenotech alloys, belong to the Concord. Return them or face sequestration. Elena's jaw clenched, but she held her silence, her fingers drumming a subtle rhythm on her thigh, a habit from bridge command, counting seconds until action. Lee met the Krell's gaze evenly. Sequestration? That's a polite word for theft. We've paid in blood and innovation. Remember the Cascade Drive? Human engineering that stabilized your warp lanes. And what did we get? Quotas that starve our outposts. The hologram shifted, projecting schematics of human vessels massing at the Sol fringe, sleek arc ships, their hulls scarred from unacknowledged battles. Thalninus tendrils writhed. Innovation without oversight is chaos. Your verdict threatens the balance. Raj couldn't resist. He tapped his slate, and a subtle overlay appeared on the shared display. A timeline of Concord betrayals from the Vega embargo to the silent abandonment of human fleet Epsilon during the Nebula incursion. Balance? Looks more like a ledger of debts unpaid. We're not begging to leave, we're informing you it's done. The chamber erupted in overlapping translations, a cacophony of clicks, hisses, and synthetic voices. Elena finally spoke, her tone cutting through like a laser sight. Our people are already en route. The first wave, 5 million souls, will cross the neutral zone by dawn cycle. Interfere and you'll see what human grit really means. Lee felt the weight of her words settle, a bridge burned in the Seine. The envoys conferred in frantic bursts, but he knew the truth. The Concord's unity was a facade cracked by self-interest. As the session adjourned in chaos, Raj leaned in. That went better than expected. No shooting at least. Elena stood, her posture unbowed. Give it time. They're scrambling now. Outside the chamber doors, the station's corridors stretched endlessly, lined with watchful security drones. Lee glanced back at the fading hologram, the human ship's icons pulsing like heartbeats. The departure wasn't a tantrum, it was justice carved from necessity. But as alarms whispered faintly in the distance, perhaps a prelude to pursuit, he wondered if the cost would be measured in lives, not just words. The hum of the engines vibrated through the deck plating, a steady pulse that Elena Voss had come to rely on like her own heartbeat. She stood at the observation window of the bridge, arms crossed, watching the stars streak by in elongated trails of light. The Avalon was pulling away from the Orion Nexus at last, humanity's arc slipping the noose of endless negotiations and veiled threats. But the knot in her stomach hadn't loosened. Jax tinkered nearby, his toolkit splayed across a console, muttering curses at a flickering diagnostic panel. These relays are older than my grandma's grudges, he said, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. His fingers, grease-streaked and nimble, danced over the wiring. Jax always joked to cut the tension, but today his wit carried an edge sharp as the tools he wielded. If we don't patch this, we'll be limping like a drunk spacer through the void. Elena turned, her gaze steady. Brave didn't mean fearless, it meant pushing forward anyway. How bad is it? We've got momentum now. The Nexus is behind us. He glanced up, his eyes narrowing under the harsh overhead lights. Bad enough that our NAV computer's spitting errors. Something's interfering, could be residual interference from their docking clamps or worse. He didn't say it, but they both knew. The Galactic Concordance wouldn't let humanity's exodus go unchallenged. Not after the verdicts, those quiet pronouncements in closed chambers where humans had exposed the aliens' resource hoarding, their engineered famines on fringe worlds. Departure wasn't defiance, it was justice served cold. A soft chime echoed from the comm station. Lyra, the only non-human on their bridge crew, a slender vexery with iridescent scales that shifted like oil on water, leaned forward. Cautious by nature, she monitored every signal with the precision of her species, her long fingers hovering over the controls. Captain, incoming transmission. It's the Concordance flagship, the Elysium. They're hailing us directly. Elena's jaw tightened. The Elysium was a behemoth, bristling with energy lances and fighter bays, captained by Admiral Kresh, a hulking Torgan whose bellows and counsel had drowned out human pleas for fair shares. On screen, but keep it audio only. No visuals, they don't deserve the view. The speakers crackled, and Kresh's voice boomed through, gravelly and laced with false concern. Voss, this is folly. Your vessel is veering off course. Power down and allow boarding. The Concordance offers mediation. Jax snorted, low enough that only Elena heard. She ignored him, stepping closer to the console. Admiral, we're not veering. We're charting our own path. Your mediation has starved colonies and silenced votes. Humanity's verdict stands, we're done. Silence stretched, broken only by the faint whine of the engines straining against some unseen drag. Lyra's scales flushed a deeper blue, her caution manifesting in a subtle tremor of her tail against the deck. Captain, she whispered, sensors show their tractors extending. Subtle, but they're trying to reel us in. Elena's mind raced. The early plan, slip away under cover of a solar flare, had backfired spectacularly. The flare had masked their launch but ionized the local plasma, scrambling their systems just enough to let the Elysium close the gap. Now, with the Ark civilian sections packed with families and frozen embryos, one wrong move could doom them all. Jax, can you reroute power to countermeasures? Give me a burst to shake them off. He was already moving, abandoning the panel to yank open the access hatch. Sparks flew as he bridged circuits with a makeshift jumper. On it. But it'll fry secondary shields. We take a hit after we're exposed. Do it. Her voice was steel. Lyra nodded, her fingers flying to amplify the evasion protocols, her caution yielding to the moment's demand. The ship shuddered as the improvised pulse fired, an electromagnetic slap that rippled through space. Alarms blared briefly, Kresh's roar cut off mid-threat, then quiet. The stars outside steadied, the drag easing. But as Elena exhaled, a new alert pinged, structural integrity warning in the cargo bays. The pulse had worked, but the cost lingered, a hairline fracture in the hull, threatening the fragile cargo of seeds and tech that represented humanity's fresh start. They were free for now, but the verdict's weight pressed heavier, the void ahead full of shadows. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles whitening against the cold metal. The stars outside the viewport stretched into infinite black, but her eyes fixed on the faint blue marble shrinking in the distance. Earth, or what was left of it after the Accord's restructuring. Her crew, a tight-knit trio she'd handpicked from the Exodus volunteers, milled about the bridge below, their voices a low hum of urgency. There was Jax, the engineer with his perpetual squint and grease-stained sleeves, always one step ahead of a breakdown. Mira, the navigator, sharp-tongued and quicker with calculations than anyone in the fleet. And Tomas, the medic, steady as bedrock, patching wounds before they even bled. The alert klaxon had blared an hour ago, pulling them from uneasy sleep. Not the pirate skirmishes they'd prepped for. No, this was worse. The ship's fusion core was flickering, output dipping below safe thresholds. Jax had cursed under his breath, diving into the access panels while Mira rerouted power from non-essentials. Lights dimmed, recyclers whirred slower. Elara had ordered rationing, but the real bite came from the external feed. The Accord's blockade ships closing in, their transmissions demanding surrender. "It's not holding," Jax reported now, emerging from the engineering bay with a tablet clutched like a shield. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his voice stayed level, that gritty determination humans wore like armor. "The core's got microfractures from the last jump. We push it, we risk cascade failure. Whole ship goes dark." Mira spun in her chair, holographic charts flickering across her console. "Options? We've got the debris field ahead, old war junk from the Orion conflicts. Could sling us through by time if we cut engines and coast." Tomas leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, his calm eyes scanning the group. "And if the fractures worsen mid-maneuver? We're blind in there. One wrong drift and we're scrap." Elara nodded, weighing their words. The Accord had called humanity's departure a tantrum, a protest against their endless meddling, curing plagues only to impose curfews, uplifting tech while chaining autonomy. But it wasn't protest. It was verdict. They judged us unfit, and we judged ourselves ready to stand alone. Now, with 1,000 souls in cryo below decks, failure meant more than capture. It meant the end of that verdict before it could echo. "Coast through the field," she decided, her tone brooking no argument. "Jax, isolate the core's auxiliary feeds, divert from life support if you have to, but keep us maneuverable. Mira, plot the tightest path. I want margins, not miracles. Tomas, prep the med bay for potential exposure. Suits on if we breach." They moved like a well-oiled machine, no wasted motion. Jax vanished back into the guts of the ship, tools clanging faintly through the decks. Myra's fingers flew over controls, her witty barbs silenced by focus, though Elara caught her muttering, "Bloody bureaucrats think they own the void." Tomas distributed emergency kits, his quiet instructions laced with that reassuring grit. "Breathe steady, we've pulled through worse." The ship shuddered as they killed thrust, inertia carrying them toward the debris field. Chunks of twisted alloy loomed in the viewport, remnants of forgotten battles between species who'd long since made peace. Except with humans, apparently. Elara strapped into the command chair, heart pounding a steady rhythm. Tension coiled in her chest, not fear but the sharp edge of resolve. This wasn't their first scrape. Back on the colonies, they jury-rigged habitats from scrap when the Accord cut supplies. Humans didn't break. They bent, then forged ahead. Alarms chirped, proximity warnings. The first debris piece grazed the hull, a metallic screech vibrating through the frame. Mira adjusted course with microbursts, her voice tight, holding, barely. That was close. Then the core whined, a high-pitched keen that set teeth on edge. Jax's voice crackled over comms. "Got it stabilized for now. But we're leaking plasma. If we don't vent soon, it'll eat through the shielding." Elara's mind raced. Venting meant exposing the ship, drawing the blockade sensors like blood and water. But staying sealed meant implosion. "Do it," she said. "Target the aft vents, away from the field. Mira, compensate." The ship bucked as plasma jettisoned, a brief flare lighting the viewport. Debris shadows danced wildly. Tomas's voice cut in, hull integrity at 82%. "Brace for impacts." A larger fragment clipped the starboard wing, alarms blaring red. Sparks flew from a console, Mira swore, slapping overrides. Elara felt the deck tilt, gravity compensator straining. In that moment, camaraderie surged, Jax shouting fixes from below, Tomas coordinating damage teams, Mira threading the needle through chaos. They emerged from the field minutes later, battered but intact. The blockade signatures faded on sensors, thrown off by the debris interference. Elara exhaled, the tension easing like a receding wave. But the core's hum was weaker now, a reminder of the cost. Repairs would take days, resources they couldn't spare. And Earth, home verdict or not, dwindled to a point of light. "Status?" she asked, voice steady. "All hands accounted," Tomas replied. "Minor injuries. We're alive." Jax grinned through the comm, wiping his brow. "Core's grumpy but it'll hold. Humans won, universe zip." Mira leaned back, flashing a tired smile. Next stop, the frontier. Let's make that verdict stick. Ilara nodded, turning back to the stars. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her command chair, the hum of the Endeavour's engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen flickered with static-laced feeds from the away team on the surface of Epsilon Eridani 4, a world the Coalition had deemed uninhabitable after humanity's exodus. But Ilara knew better, knew that the verdicts handed down by the Alien Council weren't judgments of fact, but of convenience. "Status on the drill probe?" she asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Lieutenant Reyes, her chief engineer, wiped sweat from his brow, his fingers dancing over holographic controls. "Still burrowing." Cap hit a stratum of duracrete at 50 meters, old human construction buried under millennia of dust. "We're rerouting power to the cutters, but it's slow going." Ilara nodded, eyes fixed on the feed. Down there, Dr. Lena Hart and Sergeant Kai Thorne were knee-deep in the crimson regolith, their suits' lights cutting through the perpetual twilight. The planet's thin atmosphere whispered threats of radiation and micrometeors, but it was the unknown below that gnawed at her. Humanity hadn't abandoned these outposts. They'd been forced out, their innovations labeled reckless by the Coalition's edict. Now, with the galaxy fracturing under resource wars, Ilara's mission was to reclaim what was theirs. Not for revenge, but survival. A sharp alert pierced the bridge. "Incoming transmission," Ensign Tully reported, her youthful face paling. "Coalition patrol vessel hailing us. They're demanding we vacate the system." Ilara's jaw tightened. The Verdict-class cruiser, no doubt, enforcers of the old decree. She tapped her comm. "Lena, Kai, wrap it up. We've got company." On the surface, Lena paused, her gloved hand hovering over the seismic scanner. The device hummed, painting faint outlines of vast chambers beneath the ruins, habitats, labs, power cores from the pre-Exodus era. Ilara, were so close. The readings show intact fusion cells. "If we can access them." "No time," Kai interrupted, his rifle slung low as he scanned the jagged horizon. The sergeant was all muscle and instinct, his cautious nature hidden behind a gruff exterior. He kicked at a rusted panel half buried in the dirt. "Patrols mean blockades. We dig now, we get buried with it." Lena shot him a glare through her visor. "This isn't just scrap, Kai. It's proof. Humanity built sustainable worlds here while the Coalition squabbled over stars. If we leave empty-handed," the ground trembled faintly, the drill's progress sending ripples through the soil. A new blip appeared on Lena's scanner. Movement, subsurface, and deliberate. Not seismic. Alive. "Contact," she whispered into the comm, her voice laced with wonder and wariness. "Something's responding to the probe. Biosigns, faint but intelligent." Ilara leaned forward on the bridge, the patrol's hail looping insistently. "Details, Doctor." "Now." Patterns in the vibrations, like communication. Echoes of old human protocols. "Ilara, this could be automated guardians or survivors." Kai hefted his rifle, sweeping the beam across the ruins. Shadows lengthened as the system's dim sun dipped lower, casting the derelict spires in bloody hues. "Or a trap. Coalition could have seeded it to keep us out." The transmission from the patrol cut through, a synthetic voice, cold and authoritative. "Human vessel Endeavour, you are in violation of Verdict 47 Alpha. Power down and prepare for boarding." Ilara's fingers drummed the console. Reyes glanced at her, his witty spark dimmed by fatigue. "We could bluff, say we're on a survey for the Coalition itself." She shook her head. "No lies. Not anymore." Switching channels, she addressed the away team. "Extract the probe data and pull back. We'll buy you time." As Kai and Lena scrambled to the rover, hauling the seismic unit, the subsurface signals intensified. A low rumble built, and from a cracked fissure, a metallic gleam emerged. A drone, ancient and scarred, its lights pulsing in rhythmic challenge. It hovered, scanning them, its hull etched with faded human script. "Guardian protocol active." Kai raised his weapon, but Lena placed a hand on his arm. "Wait. It's hailing us, in binary. Asking for verification." The drone's lights steadied, awaiting input. Above, Ilara watched the feed, the patrol vessel closing in like a predator scenting blood. The verdict that drove humanity away echoed in her mind, not a protest, but a sentence. Now it was time to appeal. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles whitening as the stars blurred past the viewport of the Endeavour. The ship hummed with the low thrum of engines pushing against the void, but it was the silence from the comms that clawed at her. No chatter from the fleet, no updates from the colonies they'd left behind. Just the weight of the verdict hanging in the recycled air. "Still nothing?" she asked, not turning from the glass. Her voice cut sharp, like the edge of a tool she'd used to pry open bulkheads in tighter spots. Lieutenant Rao, ever the cautious one, tapped at his console beside her. His fingers moved with deliberate slowness, as if haste might summon the wrong signal. "Negative, Captain. The relay buoy we dropped is dark. Either the Krell jammed it or—" He trailed off, his dark eyes flicking to the readouts. Rao wasn't one for speculation. He preferred data, clean and unyielding. "Or they followed through on their threats," Ilara finished, straightening. She was brave to a fault, the kind who charged into asteroid fields with a grin, but this felt like chasing shadows. The Krell, those sprawling cephalopod empires with their bioships and endless alliances, had called humanity's departure a reckless abandonment. But it wasn't recklessness, it was judgment. Years of watching the galaxy's so-called stewards bungle crises, from the Veil Nebula collapse to the Synth uprising, while humans patched the holes with grit and improvised fixes. Now, with the Federation fracturing, Earth had pulled the plug. Not in protest. In verdict, "You're on your own." The door hissed open behind them, and Dr. Lena Hart stepped in, her lab coat rumpled from hours in the engine bay. Witty Lena, with her quick retorts that could defuse a standoff or spark one. She carried a tablet, its screen glowing with schematics. "Good news and bad," she said, sliding into a chair. "The warp coil's holding barely. We can shave another day off the transit to the outer rim if we reroute power from life support." Ilara nodded, but her gaze stayed on the stars. "And the bad?" Lena hesitated, a rare crack in her composure. "The Krell probe we intercepted? It's not just tracking. It's deploying something. Microdrones by the looks of it. Swarming patterns match their old containment fields from the HFY War." Rao swore under his breath, leaning forward. "They can't seriously think they can box us in. Our shields won't hold against a full swarm," Lena cut in, her tone light but edged. "Not without the Federation's backup arrays, which we just waved goodbye to." She spun the tablet toward Ilara. "We need a plan B. Or C, hell, Z at this point." The challenge had started simple. Slip past the Krell blockade without firing a shot. Humanity's departure was meant to be clean, a quiet exodus to reclaim the scattered outposts and build anew. But the Krell, territorial to their tentacles, saw it as a threat to their stability. They'd mine the jump lanes, turn neutral space into a hazard zone. One wrong move, and the Endeavour, the lead ship carrying the last diplomatic envoys and tech blueprints, would be adrift, a sitting target. Ilara paced, her boots echoing softly. The deck plates vibrated as the ship adjusted course, dodging a debris field from some long-forgotten skirmish. Initial plan was evasion, ghost through on minimal signature. That backfired when their probe latched on during the last fold. She stopped, eyes narrowing. "Rao, how's the decoy drone coming?" 60%, he replied, pulling up a hollow projection. The tiny replica of the Endeavour flickered into view, its simulated drive core pulsing. "But it'll only buy us minutes. The swarm adapts fast." Lena leaned in, pointing at a weak point in the schematic. "Then we make it smarter. Overload the decoy's core with a feedback loop, mimic a reactor breach. Draws the swarm in, then boom. Not enough to destroy them, but enough to scatter." Ilara considered it, the idea sparking like a live wire. Clever adaptation, human style. No grand weapons, just turning the enemy's tool against them. But risk lingered. If the swarm closed too soon, the backlash could fry their own systems. Real cost, maybe the ship, maybe lives. "Prep it," Ilara said finally, her voice steady. "Rao, you handle the launch. Lena, tweak the shields to pulse and sync, make us look like debris until it's clear." She met their eyes, camaraderie solid as hull plating. "We get through this and the rim's ours. No looking back." As they moved to their stations, the viewport filled with a distant glimmer, the first hints of the swarm like glittering dust in the black. Tension coiled, earnest and unyielding. The Endeavour pressed on, engines flaring brighter. Hours blurred into a tense rhythm. Rao's fingers flew over controls, finalizing the decoy's programming. Lena muttered calculations under her breath, her wits surfacing in a dry quip. If this works, I'll buy the first round on New Terra. If not, well, drinks are on the house in hell. Ilara stood at the command nexus, monitoring the scopes. The swarm grew, a shimmering cloud blotting out stars. Their plan hinged on timing. Release the decoy at the optimal vector, let it draw the drones like moths to flame. Decoy away, Rao announced, voice tight. Elena gripped the armrests of her command chair, the faint hum of the engines vibrating through the deck like a distant heartbeat. The view screen ahead showed the swirling nebula they'd plotted as their shortcut, a gamble to shake the pursuing galactic enforcement fleet. Stars blurred into streaks of light as the verdict accelerated, but the readings on her console painted a grim picture. Radiation levels spiking. Shields holding barely. Captain, Marcus Hale's voice crackled over the intercom from engineering, laced with that dry wit that kept the crew from cracking. This nebula's got more teeth than a Vorath beast. We're shedding hull integrity like old skin. If we push through, we might come out the other side as cosmic dust. She glanced at the empty co-pilot seat. Lena, their navigator, was still in medbay, fighting the fever from the sabotage virus that had hit during their last jump. Just the three of them now, her, Marcus, and young Tarek, the comms officer barely out of his teens, manning the auxiliary station with wide eyes and steady hands. Humanity's verdict on the Alliance's hypocrisy had been swift. Pack up and leave before they could be dragged into another endless war. But verdicts, Elena knew, came with chasers. Options, Marcus? She asked, keeping her tone level. No room for panic. Not when the fleet's signatures blinked red on the tactical display, closing the gap. A pause, then his face appeared on the split screen, grease-streaked and grinning faintly. We could vent plasma to mask our trail, buy us time. Or reroute power to the gravitics, slingshot around that gas giant fragment. Risky, but it'd flip us out of their sensor net. Tarek leaned forward, fingers flying over his panel. Sensors picking up anomalies in the nebula. Could be debris, or mines. Alliance doesn't play fair. Elena nodded, weighing it. The plasma vent was clean, predictable. But the gravitics maneuver? That was Marcus's specialty, human ingenuity at its grittiest, bending physics where alien tech just followed protocols. Go with the slingshot. Tarek, jam their comms on my mark. Let's make them chase ghosts. The ship groaned as Marcus diverted power, the deck tilting slightly under inertial dampeners straining to compensate. Elena felt the pull in her gut, a reminder of how fragile their exodus was. The verdict wasn't some gleaming Alliance dreadnought, she was a refitted freighter, patched together from scraps after the embargo hit. Humans leaving wasn't a tantrum, it was a judgment call, a refusal to prop up a galaxy that valued obedience over innovation. But now, with the nebula's glow bathing the bridge in eerie purple, that judgment felt like a noose tightening. Mark, she said. Tarek hit the jammer, a burst of white noise flooding the ether. The view screen filled with the nebula's heart, towering clouds of ionized gas, lit by the fury of a dying star. The gas giant fragment loomed ahead, a jagged moonlet tumbling lazily. Marcus's voice cut in, engaging gravitics. Hold on, this'll feel like a bar brawl. The ship lurched. Alarms wailed as the maneuver kicked in, artificial gravity warping space around them. Elena braced, watching the tactical plot. The fleet's icons hesitated, confused by the sudden vector shift. For a heartbeat, triumph flickered, they were pulling away. Then the fragment cracked. Not from their pass, from within. Scans lit up, hidden fissures, unstable core. The slingshot's pull had triggered a cascade, and now a spray of molten rock erupted toward them, shards the size of shuttles hurtling through the void. Evade! Elena barked, but it was too late. The first chunk glanced off the shields, a thunderclap shaking the hull. Lights flickered, consoles sparked. Shields at 40%, Tarek reported, voice tight. Incoming wave, too many to dodge. Marcus swore over the comm, grav drives overheating. We can't maneuver without ripping the nacelles off. Elena's mind raced. The plasma vent, their backup, but in this soup, it'd ignite the nebula like a match in hydrogen. Catastrophic. No, worse, It could chain react, taking the fleet with them. A Pyrrhic end, but an end. Abort slingshot, she ordered. Marcus, isolate the drive and prep emergency purge. Tarek, get me a firing solution on the largest fragments. Use the point defense lasers to clear a path. But Captain, Tarek protested, that'll light us up like a beacon. Better a target than debris. She unstrapped, standing as the ship bucked again. Another hit, closer this time, the view screen webbed with stress fractures. Pain lanced through her side from the jolt, but she ignored it. Humans didn't quit, they adapted. Verdict delivered, now survive to enforce it. Engineering klaxons blared in the background feed. Marcus's face was all focus now, no grin. Purge ready. But if we don't thread this needle, we're done. Elena took the helm herself, hands steady on the controls. The debris field rushed at them, a storm of fire and stone. She plotted the narrow gap, the one the lasers might carve. Fire on my lead. All hands brace. The Verdict plunged in, lasers lancing out in precise bursts. Shards vaporized, but one massive boulder clipped the wing. Metal screamed, atmosphere whistling from a breach. Alarms howled. They were through, but limping, the nebula's glow fading behind as the fleet signatures reappeared, hungrier now. In medbay, Lena stirred weakly, Elena gripped the armrest of her command chair, the bridge lights flickering like distant stars caught in a storm. The view screen showed the debris field ahead, a graveyard of shattered hulls from the last skirmish with the Vexery patrol. Her ship, the UNS Verdict, hummed with strained efficiency, every deck plate vibrating under the push of auxiliary thrusters. Jax was at the engineering console, his fingers dancing over holographic readouts, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill in the air. Captain, we've got a narrow window through that mess, Jax said, his voice steady but edged with that familiar wit. If we thread it right, we slingshot around the pulsar and lose the tails. But one wrong nudge and we're confetti. She nodded, eyes locked on the swirling chaos of metal and rock. The Vexery weren't just chasing. They were herding, forcing humanity's Exodus fleet into this trap. The Federation's allies had turned enforcers the moment the verdict dropped. Humans weren't leaving without paying reparations for disrupting the peace. What a joke. Elena's jaw tightened. Her crew of 200, a mix of veterans and fresh recruits, depended on this maneuver. One slip, and the verdict became another statistic in the Federation's ledger. Helm, plot the course Jax feeds you. Full burn on my mark. Her words cut through the tension, sharp as a laser sight. The bridge crew moved like a well-oiled machine, voices overlapping in clipped confirmations. Ensign Lara, the cautious one, glanced her way, doubt flickering in her eyes before she buried it in her work. The ship lurched forward, engines groaning as they plunged into the debris. Chunks of wreckage loomed, twisted remnants of some long-forgotten war. Elena felt the G-forces press her back, her mind racing through contingencies. They jury-rigged the shields with human ingenuity, layered ablative plating over alien emitters, but against this? It was a gamble. A proximity alarm blared. Incoming fragment, dead ahead. Lara shouted. Jax swore under his breath. Evasive. Port 15 degrees. The verdict shuddered, a massive girder clipping the starboard nacelle with a screech of rending metal. Sparks erupted from consoles and Elena's chair bucked beneath her. Alarms wailed, red lights bathing the bridge in bloody glow. Damage report. Shields at 40%, Jax called, already rerouting power. Nacelles breached, plasma leaks. We're venting atmosphere in Section 7. Elena's mind flashed to the faces in those quarters. Families, engineers, the kids they'd promised a new start. The plan had been clean. Slip the net, rendezvous with the main fleet at Epsilon Eridani. But the Vexery had anticipated, their drones seeding the field with hidden mines. The early feint through the outer belt had drawn fire, but it backfired spectacularly. Now pursuers closed in, their sleek cruisers cutting through the debris like predators through fog. Seal off Section 7. Get med teams down there. She unstrapped, moving to Jax's station. Up close, his usual smirk was gone, replaced by grim focus. Can we still make the slingshot? He met her gaze, tools already in hand for a quick patch. Maybe. But it'll cost us speed. Those Vexery bastards will be on us before we clear the pulsar. The view screen updated, 3 enemy ships gaining fast. Their weapons' arrays glowed, charging for a volley. Elena's hand hovered over the comms. Call for help? The fleet was too far, scattered by the same trap. No, this was on them. Human grit or nothing. Divert auxiliary power to forward shields, she ordered. And, Jax, give me something clever. Override the safeties on the impulse drive. His eyes lit up, a spark of that ingenuity she'd relied on since the academy. Risky. Could fry the core if we're not careful. Do it. She turned back to the helm. Prepare for evasive pattern delta. We're not going down without a fight. The ship dove deeper into the field, debris pinging off the hull like hail. A mine detonated nearby, the shockwave rattling teeth. Elena braced as another alarm pierced the din, hull integrity dropping. In the chaos, she caught Lara's whisper to a tech, "We're not making it." But Elena pushed it aside. They'd voted to leave the Federation not in anger but in clarity, a verdict on centuries of exploitation masked as unity. This chase was just the universe testing if they meant it. And damn if she'd let it win. Jax's console beeped triumphantly. Override engaged. Impulse at 150%. Hold on, this is gonna be bumpy. The verdict surged, weaving through a canyon of wreckage. The pulsar loomed ahead, its radiation a hazy veil. Enemy fire streaked past, one shot grazing the aft section with a deafening boom. Smoke filled the air, acrid and choking, but the ship held. For now. As they neared the slingshot point, Elena allowed herself a breath. The cost was mounting, lives, ship integrity, but the alternative was surrender. And humanity didn't do surrender. Not anymore. The dim hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the deck plates, a steady reminder that they were still moving, still escaping the gravitational pull of the verdant nexus. Captain Reyes gripped the armrest of her command chair, her knuckles whitening as she stared at the holographic display. The alien fleet, those sleek iridescent vessels from the Coalition, had finally caught up, their signatures blooming like predatory flowers on the edge of the sensor net. "They're hailing us again," said Jax, her voice steady but edged with the fatigue of 3 straight shifts. The comms officer leaned forward, her fingers dancing over the console, pulling up the incoming transmission. Reyes nodded, not trusting her voice yet. The screen flickered to life, revealing Ambassador Kale's elongated face, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the bridge lights in fractured rainbows. "Captain," he began, his translated voice smooth as polished stone, "this pursuit is unnecessary. The Coalition seeks only to understand your verdict. Humanity's withdrawal disrupts the balance we've maintained for cycles. Reconsider." His words hung in the air, laced with that familiar Coalition arrogance, as if humans were errant children straying from the path. She leaned into the pickup, her dark eyes locking onto his. "Understand? You've had decades to understand, Ambassador. We built your defenses, mapped your stars, and pulled your fleets out of black holes you couldn't even detect. And for what? Your balance, left billions starving on fringe worlds while your core enjoyed the fruits." Jax shot her a sidelong glance, her cautious nature urging restraint, but Reyes pressed on. "This isn't a tantrum. It's a verdict on a system that values harmony over survival. We're done propping it up." Kale's mandibles clicked softly, a sign of irritation in his species. "Your ingenuity is admired, yes, but isolation will doom you. The void storms approach, an environmental cataclysm your single arc ship cannot weather alone." The hologram wavered as interference from the pursuing ships spiked the signal. Reyes felt the weight of it, the real stakes pressing in. The storms were no metaphor, vast electromagnetic tempests birthed in the galaxy's unstable core, shredding hulls and frying systems. Their ship, the Odyssey, was humanity's last bastion, carrying the seed banks, the frozen embryos, the knowledge vaults, everything to start anew. One wrong move, and it all ended in cosmic dust. Jax muted the channel briefly, turning to her captain. "He's not wrong about the storms. Our shields are at 72% after that last skirmish with the patrols. If they force a boarding..." She trailed off, her witty edge dulled by the numbers scrolling across her screen. Reyes knew Jax's mind, always calculating odds, the cautious counterpoint to her own bold charges. "We adapt," Reyes replied, unmuting the hail. "Tell your fleet to stand down, Kale. We're not rejoining. We're forging our own path." The ambassador's eyes narrowed. Then you force our hand. The coalition cannot allow precedent. The transmission cut, replaced by the shrill alert of weapons lock. Alarms blared as the lead coalition cruiser fired a warning shot, the plasma bolt streaking past like a comet's tail, close enough to rattle the bulkheads. Reyes slammed the comms. Evasive maneuvers. Divert power to forward deflectors. The ship groaned in response, thrusters firing in a desperate spiral that slung them toward a nearby asteroid cluster, jagged rocks tumbling in lazy orbits. In the engineering bay below, Dr. Lena Voss wiped sweat from her brow, her hands buried in the access panel of the core reactor. Sparks flew as she rerouted energy flows, her brave determination shining through the grime on her face. "Come on, you stubborn beast," she muttered, twisting a conduit with a wrench. The initial plan, slipping through the asteroid field undetected, had backfired when a coalition probe jammed their stealth field. Now, with the storm's outer fringes already whipping interference across their comms, every second counted. A tremor shook the deck, another shot had grazed them. "Jax, tell the captain we're boosting output by 20%, but it'll fry the secondary arrays if we push longer than 10 minutes. Up on the bridge, Jax relayed the message, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Lena says 10 minutes max, Cap. After that, we're blind." Reyes nodded, plotting a course that wove them deeper into the rocks, where the coalition's superior firepower might hesitate. The asteroids loomed large now, one massive boulder eclipsing the stars, its surface pocked with craters like ancient wounds. Tension coiled in her chest, not dramatic fear but the sharp clarity of adventure turned perilous. They were humans after all, gritty, adaptive, turning verdicts into voyages. As the Odyssey darted between the stones, a coalition fighter broke formation, closing fast. Reyes gripped the controls, her mind racing through options. "Jax, target their engines with the point defense lasers. Non-lethal if we can." The officer complied, her shots lancing out in precise bursts, clipping the pursuer's thrusters. It spun wildly, careening into an asteroid with a silent bloom of debris. But more were coming, and the storm's edge was visible now, a swirling wall of ionized gas on the long-range scans promising chaos. In the bay, Lena sealed the panel, the reactor humming louder, a triumphant growl. She patched through to the bridge. "Power surge online. We've got your 10 minutes, make them count." Reyes allowed herself a grim smile. Teamwork, earned in the heat of the moment, not some grand speech. But as the first tendrils of the void storm brushed their shields, flickering lights across the hull, she knew the cost. Damaged arrays meant no quick repairs. No. Elena gripped the railing of the observation deck, her knuckles white against the cold metal. Stars streaked past the viewport like fleeting accusations, the hum of the engines a constant reminder that they were committed now, no turning back. The verdict had been delivered months ago in the sterile halls of the Galactic Concord, where humanity's envoys had laid out the failures. Broken promises, exploited resources, alliances that crumbled under the weight of alien indifference. It wasn't a protest, it was a severance, clean and final. But the Concord hadn't let go easily. Blockade ships dotted the system ahead, their hulls glinting like predatory eyes in the void. "Captain," Marco's voice crackled over the intercom, laced with that familiar wry edge that cut through the tension. "Sensors are picking up 3 more interceptors peeling off from the main fleet. They're not hailing. Looks like the welcome committee's getting impatient." She straightened, forcing her gaze from the stars to the tactical display flickering on the bulkhead. Marco was down in engineering, his hands likely already buried in the guts of the drive core, coaxing miracles from machinery that had been pushed to its limits. Beside her stood Lyra, the avian diplomat who defected with them, feathers ruffled, her sharp beak clicking in agitation. Lyra had been the bridge, the one alien who'd seen humanity's worth beyond the Concord's ledgers. Now she was all in, her caution tempered by the fire of betrayal. "Options?" Elena asked, keeping her tone steady. No room for doubt, the crew was watching through the ship-wide feed. Lyra's eyes, multifaceted and gleaming, scanned the display. "The blockade's forming a net, standard Concord tactic. They expect us to punch through the center. But if we veer toward the asteroid belt at Vector 47, we might use the debris for cover. Risky though. One wrong maneuver and we're scrap." Marco chimed in, his breath heavy from exertion. I can reroute auxiliary power to the shields, buy us some time. But the core's overheating, another hard burn like that and we lose maneuverability. Your call, Cap. Elena nodded to herself, the weight of it settling like gravity. The departure wasn't just about leaving, it was about what came after. Humanity's colonies scattered across the fringe, reliant on this ship for the seed tech that would rebuild them independent. Fail here and it was isolation, not freedom. She tapped the console. Helm, plot course for the belt. Marco, give me everything you've got on those shields. Lyra, talk to me, any weak points in their formation? As the ship banked sharply, the deck vibrating underfoot, Lyra leaned in, her talons clicking on the floor. The lead cruiser, it's a Vexor class, outdated. Their targeting arrays are vulnerable to EMP bursts if we get close enough. But we'd have to draw fire first. The first salvo hit like thunder, alarms blaring as red blooms erupted across the shields. Elena braced, the ship shuddering. Evasive. Marco's status. Holding, barely, he grunted. Shields at 62%. If they coordinate another volley, we're dancing on the edge. Through the viewport, the asteroid belt loomed, a jagged swarm of rock and ice tumbling in lazy orbits. Elena's mind raced, piecing it together. Humanity's edge had always been adaptation, turning scraps into strategies, grit into survival. Lyra, can you spoof their comms? Make it look like we're signaling surrender? The avian tilted her head, a flicker of surprise in her gaze. Possible. But why? To split them. Let the lead cruiser break off for the prize. Then we hit it with the EMP from the belt's shadow. Marco laughed, a sharp bark over the line. Sneaky. I like it. Rerouting emitters now, give me 30 seconds. The plan unfolded in fragments. Lyra's modulated signal cutting through the chatter, a false plea laced with static. The lead cruiser veered, its engines flaring as it isolated toward them, the rest of the blockade hesitating in confusion. Elena watched the distances close, sweat beading on her brow. One asteroid clipped the hull with a groan of metal, but they plunged deeper, the debris field swallowing the ship like a protective shroud. Now! Elena barked. Marco's EMP burst lanced out, invisible but devastating. A pulse that fried the cruiser's arrays in a shower of sparks visible even from afar. The big ship listed, weapons silent, as secondary explosions rippled along its flank. Cheers erupted from the crew channels, but Elena silenced them with a raised hand. The blockade was regrouping, and the core's warning lights pulsed ominously. Clear path opening, the helmsman reported. But we're venting plasma, won't make the jump without repairs. Lyra placed a taloned hand on Elena's shoulder, her voice soft amid the din. We bought time. Humanity's verdict stands. They'll think twice now. Elena allowed herself a grim smile as the ship accelerated, leaving the crippled cruiser adrift. The stars ahead weren't just escape, they were horizon. But the cost lingered, the core's strain a ticking debt, the fringe worlds waiting with their own trials. Departure was the verdict, but arrival would be the proof. The dim hum of the auxiliary engines vibrated through the deck plates as Elena gripped the command rail, her knuckles whitening against the cold metal. The view screen flickered with static-laced feeds from the outer hull cams, showing the swirling nebula that had become their reluctant sanctuary. 3 days since the Armada's last transmission, and the fuel cells were dipping below critical, enough for one more burn, maybe two if they nursed it. Marcus hunched over his console, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill, his fingers dancing across patched-together diagnostics. She's holding, Cap, but that ion storm we skirted? It's chewing through the shielding like acid on foil. If we push for the relay point now, we might make it. Might. Arya paced behind them, her tablet clutched like a shield, eyes darting between readouts and the encrypted logs from the Council's final betrayal. The aliens had sealed the departure lanes not with weapons but with a web of regulatory traps, embargoes on resupply, false distress signals luring ships into ambushes. It wasn't war, it was suffocation, a verdict of their own making reversed upon them. We can't risk it, she said, voice steady but edged with the caution that had kept her alive through a dozen negotiations. The probe data shows patrols thickening. One wrong vector and we're driftwood for their salvage crews. Elena straightened, meeting Marcus's gaze in the reflection of the screen. His wit had cracked more than a few tense moments on this voyage, but now his jaw was set, the usual spark dimmed by exhaustion. She remembered the launch from Seoul, the cheers fading into resolve as humanity cut ties, not in anger but in quiet judgment. The galaxy had dismissed them as primitives, hoarding their inferior innovations, only to watch those same tools turn the tide in crises they couldn't fathom. Now, with the fleet scattered and the core world's beacons silent, survival hinged on this ragtag escort vessel punching through. A sharp alarm pierced the bridge, red lights pulsing like a heartbeat. Marcus swore under his breath, pulling up the alert. Hull breach in Sector 4. Wait, no, it's the graph plating. Feedback from the storms messing with the inertial dampers. If we don't reroute power. He trailed off, already moving, toolkit clanging against his belt. Elena nodded, her mind racing through contingencies. The initial plan, slip the nebula's edge, hail the nearest human outpost, had crumbled when the storm hit, forcing them deeper into its turbulent heart. Arya had argued for waiting, broadcasting a decoy signal to draw off pursuers, but that backfired spectacularly. The aliens' response drones had jammed their comms, leaving them blind and isolated. Now, with oxygen recyclers straining and the crew's murmurs turning to doubts in the corridors, the cost felt personal. One of the engineers from the lower decks had lost a hand to a sparking conduit yesterday. The medbay was a makeshift affair, bandages and grit holding them together. "Route it," Elena said, her voice cutting through the din. "Divert from non-essentials. Lights, recyclers if you have to. Get us stable." She turned to Arya. "And you, pull those council archives again. There has to be a loophole in their blockade protocols. Something they overlooked because they never thought we'd actually leave." Arya hesitated, then nodded, fingers flying over her tablet. The earnest pull of adventure had drawn her to diplomacy, but this was no grand summit. It was scavenging scraps of bureaucracy for a lifeline. As Marcus dove into the access panel, sparks flying in brief arcs, Elena watched the nebula churn outside, a vast, indifferent canvas of purples and silvers, lit by distant stars that humanity would claim on its own terms. The risk was real. Failure meant capture, dissection of their tech, erasure of the verdict they delivered. But in the grit of it, the camaraderie sharpened. Marcus's grunt of effort, Arya's murmured, "Got it, maybe?" A quiet triumph building against the void. The ship shuddered as the reroute kicked in, the alarms fading to a wary whine. Marcus emerged, face smudged with grease, a wry grin breaking through. "She's purring again. For now. Cap, if we adapt the drive coils like I sketched, use the storm's ions to boost instead of fight, we could shave hours off the transit." Risky but clever. Elena considered it, the weight of command settling like the artificial gravity. Outside, a tendril of plasma licked the shields, a reminder that adaptation wasn't optional. "Do it," she said. "Arya, sink your loophole to the NAV plot. We're not protesting anymore. We're gone." The bridge fell into focused rhythm, hands and voices weaving the escape, the nebula's glow casting long shadows that spoke of costs yet to come, ships lost, alliances shattered, but also of the ingenuity that would carry them home. The bridge of the Odyssey hummed with a quiet that felt earned, the kind that follows a storm when the winds finally slacken but the horizon still whispers of rain. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the viewport, her fingers tracing the edge of the console, watching the swirling nebula that marked the edge of known space. Behind her, the crew moved with purposeful efficiency, Dr. Liam Kerr patching the last of the auxiliary systems, his brow furrowed in concentration. Ensign Tara Singh monitoring the NAV charts, her quick fingers dancing over holographic displays. And Marcus Hale, the engineer whose wit had kept them sane through the worst, now slumped in a chair, nursing a bandaged arm but flashing a grin that said he'd do it all again. The alien fleet signatures blinked faintly on the main screen, retreating now, their once imposing formation fracturing like ice under pressure. It hadn't been a battle of weapons, not really, just human stubbornness turned into strategy. The verdict from the Galactic Concord had been clear. Humanity's reckless independence disqualified them from the Alliance, stripping away shared resources and safe harbors. But Elena had seen it differently. Not a protest, but a judgment on the Concord's own fragility. They'd underestimated what humans could improvise when backed into a corner. "Liam, status on the warp core?" Elena asked, her voice steady, though her pulse still raced from the close call. "Stable, Captain. That jury-rigged bypass held barely. We're good for another jump, but it'll be rough without a full refit." He wiped sweat from his forehead, glancing at Marcus. "Your idea with the plasma relays? Genius. Reckless but genius." Marcus chuckled, wincing as he shifted. "Flattery will get you extra rations, Doc. Just don't tell the Concord we turned their gift of obsolete tech into a shield generator." Tara looked up from her station, her cautious nature shining through in the way she double-checked every reading. Incoming message from the Vexery lead ship. "They're apologizing? Offering terms." Elena turned, crossing her arms. The Vexery had been the Concord's enforcers, their sleek vessels designed for precision strikes, not the chaotic adaptability humans brought to the fray. During the chase through the asteroid fields, Elena's team had used the debris not as obstacles but as allies, detonating micro-yields to create electromagnetic pulses that fried the aliens' sensors. It was gritty, hands-on work, the kind that left scars, but it bought them this moment. "Patch it through," she said. The comms crackled, and a holographic form materialized. Ambassador Krell of the Vexery, his iridescent scales dimmed, tentacles twitching with unease. "Captain Vasquez, the Concord re-evaluates. Your verdict on our unity exposes flaws we cannot ignore. Join us as equals or go your way. But know this, the void ahead is vast and alliances forge paths where isolation falters." Elena met the hologram's gaze, her brave resolve tempered by the weight of what they'd lost. 2 crew members gone in the initial skirmish, their shuttle vaporized by a miscalculated pursuit. The Odyssey itself bore the marks, gouges in the hull, flickering lights in non-critical bays. But they'd adapted, turning scavenged parts from derelict stations into tools that outmaneuvered ships built by empires. "We appreciate the offer, Ambassador," she replied, her tone earnest, no trace of triumph's gloating. "But humanity's departure wasn't born of spite. It was us seeing what you couldn't, that true strength isn't in decrees or fleets, but in what we build when everything falls apart." She paused, letting the words settle. "We'll chart our own course. Maybe our paths cross again, on better terms." The hologram flickered out, and silence returned, broken only by the soft beeps of systems coming online. Tara plotted the jump coordinates, her hands steady now, the caution giving way to quiet pride. Heading for the uncharted relay point. ETA to stable space, 12 hours. As the Odyssey aligned for the leap, Elena felt the ship's subtle groan, a reminder of the costs etched into its frame. The stars ahead blurred into streaks, pulling them beyond the Concorde's reach. No grand speeches echoed in the corridors. Instead, Marcus cracked a joke about alien apologies tasting like regret, and Liam shared a nod with Tara, their camaraderie a silent vow to keep going. Humanity's verdict lingered not as a wound, but as a spark, proof that grit and ingenuity could carve new worlds from the dark. And in that vastness they pressed on, not alone but unbound.